Welcome once again to today's lesson, and we are continuing with economic development and planning. And if you can recall, last time we talked about goals of development, and if you can recall clearly, we talked about these goals of development as as we talk about economic development, any government cannot talk about developing without setting the goals. What does it want to achieve at the end of it all? And so some of these goals of development, we talked about improving the living standards, that is the living standards of the people within the country. We talked about reducing unemployment, and we know very well that when we reduce unemployment means that we are able to provide job opportunities, and people are able to get income, and of course they are able to take care of their needs. We just talked about reduction in income inequalities. So even as the government endeavors to create employment, yes, to create income, but it also have a moral obligation to ensure that even this income, there is the income disparities is not that much. The difference between the ones who are earning high income and the ones who are earning low income, it is reduced, for that matter. Provide an environment for advanced technology. That's also another goal of development, and of course to ensure that there is a good social infrastructure, where we talked about this infrastructure as pertains to schools, hospitals, road transport, and so on and so forth. And so today, as we said, we are going to talk about which are these factors which hinder development, factors which hinder development, because we know very well that even as the government puts in place all these measures to ensure that there is development, we know very well that there are those hindrances that come in, and which even as the government plans, even as it sets its goals, it has to ensure that these factors, it takes care of these factors which hinder this development, or it is aware of these factors. Otherwise, if it is not aware, then it means that it can start a particular development project only for it to fail at the end of it all, because maybe it had not taken into consideration these hindrances. And so we start with these factors which hinder development. And the first one is low natural resource endowment. From the topic of production, we know very well that no any given country, not even country, no any entrepreneur who can be engaged in production activities if you do not have this, if you don't have resources. And that's why we talked about the factors of production. And so when you talk about these resources, specifically we talk about the natural resources, because we know without these natural resources, no any given country can be able to produce. No any given country can be able to engage in any production activity. And this is why we are talking about raw materials. We are talking about land. Those resources that occur naturally, we know about them. And so when a country has this resource endowment, it means that it has an upper hand as regards to this development. And so we are talking about if there is low natural resources, that can be a factor that can hinder this development. Yes, of course, we know we can talk about importing from other countries and all that. But before we talk about importing, already it is a hindrance, because if we don't have these resources within our reach in our country, then it means that as we import from other countries, then it means that it's going to be a hindrance. For that matter, we are going to encounter challenges even as we import from those other countries, and even at times some countries may not even allow exploitation of natural resources because even themselves they are engaged in production activities. So that is a factor that can hinder development. Then another one is what we refer to as market constraint. Market constraints. And so when you talk about this market constraint, this is where we have you remember the vicious cycle of poverty. When there is low per capita income, it leads to low demand. There is low per capita income. That means people are not able to earn enough to be able to take care of their needs and even be able to going with the even vicious cycle of poverty, even to be able to save. But we are talking about when there is that low per capita income, it leads to low demand for the goods, which of course leads to eventually low production, because we cannot talk about producing if we do not have market for whatever we are producing. And therefore it means that that can be a factor of development, because we cannot produce if we do not have market to sell this product. Mm-hmm. Another one is lack of adequate capital. We know very well that we can be having these resources, we can be having natural resources within our country, we can be having all this manpower, but if we do not have the capital to exploit these resources, we are talking about machines, we are talking about all what we need, the man-made resources, to be able to harness these resources, then it means that again we are not going to develop. Another factor is socio-cultural constraints. Of course, we know that in some societies, sometimes there is, I would say, some sort of resistance to progressive ideas. We know of cases where people have literally refused development. That you hear that there is a need to construct maybe a road connecting maybe a major town to a rural setup, and maybe people within that area, they literally refuse, that they don't want that road to pass through their land for whatever reasons. So we are talking of there could be that socio-cultural constraints, that people may be having those that kind of resistance to progressive ideas. We know of cultural attitudes that are very negative. For example, even towards education, that there are some cultural practices, or there are some people who would literally refuse to take their children to school for whatever reason. And so we are talking about, even if the government has that very good motive to develop or to even construct these schools, to provide the manpower and to be able to get these resources, then sometimes they may not be possible because there is that kind of resistance. Another one is poor technology. Poor technology. Sometimes we may, yes, you remember you talked about goals of development as where we be able to create, the government is able to create that environment for appropriate technology, but even at times this technology may not be there. Right now we are talking about, for example, in our Kenyan situation, we are very much in need of this advanced technology, but we know that there are those countries which are already far much ahead of us in terms of technology. So we can actually say that at times we may want to develop, we may want to use this technology, but we don't have it in our hands. Take a very good example, our natural resource that was discovered just the other day, oil in Takana. We may have this resource, yes, it is there. We may even have the capital, but do we have the technology to be able to drill this oil? That's where we are contracting now other countries who have this technology to be able to assist us now to get this resource, and of course be able to benefit us and even other people. Unfavorable domestic environment. That can be another factor that can hinder development. Unfavorable domestic environment. And so when you talk of this unfavorable domestic environment, this is in relation to, for example, there are some factors that hinder entrepreneurial growth. One of the major uh, factors that hinder this is a very good example is corruption in our country. You know that when we have this environment which is not conducive for entrepreneurship, that people are corrupt in all manner of things, that even for those people who would want to invest, before you invest, you are subjected to a lot of corrupt deals, that you are not even given the license to trade before you have given out some money that is not accounted for. So we are talking of unfavorable domestic environment. And so even if we may have people who are willing to invest, at times we have other cases where people who had some interest in investing in our country have literally decided to vacate and relocate to other countries. And so that's another factor for hindering development. Others are natural factors, some things to do with diseases and even what we refer to as poor nutrition and diseases. At times, some diseases, pandemics like what we have right now, the COVID-19, AIDS, they have literally hindered development, because at times they have wiped out a lot of human resource, and which we know very well that it is very much important when it comes to economic development. So for today, we're going to stop at that. So we're going to continue next time with development planning. Thank you.